that you can see my screen, please.
Yes, we can see you.
Okay, perfect. So hi everyone, my name is Belén. I am an intelligence analyst at a London-based company named Century Intelligence, and previously I worked for the NATO Strategic Communications Center of Excellence, extensively researching on information laundering processes, mainly targeting the Nordic-Baltic countries. So before I fully start with my presentation, I want to briefly say that although online manipulation techniques such as disinformation are undeniably growing threats to our democracy, it is also good to celebrate the increasing efforts at the national and international level to raise awareness, educate, and develop resilient institutions that can effectively counter these threats. Like, for example, this forum, which allows us to discuss an interdisciplinary approach to new disinformation trends. So thank you very much, Aurora and the Cardiff team, for organizing it. So basically, well, where does information laundering fit in the context of this workshop? Information laundering is a practice that allows hostile actors, both foreign and domestic, to manipulate data, spread influence, and destabilize online ecosystems in an effective, fast, and subtle manner through the combination of different techniques. One of these techniques is disinformation. The theoretical model of information laundering that I'm going to present was developed as part of the NATO Strategic Communications Center of Excellence's efforts to understand Russian information influence activities in the Nordic-Baltic region. The model was applied to a comparative analysis of 32 information laundering cases linked to the activity of 570 single actors in the 8 Nordic-Baltic countries. I am going to first briefly go through the methodology of the study, then highlight some key findings, and finally we'll proceed to concluding remarks. So the concept of information laundering utilizes a metaphor of money laundering to understand and visualize the life cycle of hostile information influence campaigns. In this case, like money laundering tries to conceal money obtained from illegal activities, information laundering is aimed at providing false information, a facade of legitimacy. So basically, information laundering occurs when a network of actors produces and legitimizes false or deceitful information through the application of a set of techniques in order to decontextualize it and obscure the original source. So basically, you wash the information and it becomes clean. I think that, I mean, one of the clearest examples to introduce information laundering are QAnon theories. Or other conspiracy theories too, which start as marginal stories posted on fringe websites or forums, and through the application and combination of different techniques, they progressively make their way to the mainstream online conversation. In this approach, different techniques are used for different purposes, and the right combination is the key to accomplish an effective information laundering. So basically, as we see there, we have some techniques that are aimed at directly altering the content of a piece of information, for example, disinformation. Then other techniques will be more aimed at decontextualizing the information or part of it, like misappropriations. Other group of techniques will be used to set up a bias in the audience a priori, for example, misleading headlines. And another final group will try to increment the legitimacy of the laundered information. And this case will be smurfing techniques and Potemkin villages. So within an information laundering scheme, this information is utilized in combination with other techniques, such as deceitful translations or misappropriations, to contribute to the progressive distortion of the piece of information. And the effect of this information within an IL scheme will be to accelerate the distortion of the information by introducing blunt falsification of the events. These techniques are applied by actors of several natures. So when we studied that the actors that were involved in information laundering processes in the Nordic-Baltic region, we came up with this categorization, which tries to zoom in the particular behavior of an actor around a piece of content. And this is very important because it is necessary to distinguish the actors that participate, like Kremlin official actors or procurement actors that participate in an information laundering process, from those that are accidental actors that actually can be also applying some of these techniques, but unwillingly. For example, let's say a journalist that utilizes misleading headlines in order to attain this clickbait effect, or social media users sharing content without knowing the source it comes from. But there are other techniques that indeed suggest a more coordinated type or more coordinated type of activity, like for example, Potemkin villages and smurfing. When we speak about the smurfing, we refer to an actor that creates several accounts or platforms in order to disseminate the laundered content, the same laundered content in each account or each platform. So it increases the visibility and like helps the legitimacy building process of the laundering, the laundering process that we are going through. And also Potemkin villages that will refer to when a network of actors reinforces and endorse each other by sharing each other's content and commenting positively in each other's content. So that also supports the legitimacy process of like it confers, it gives some legitimacy to the laundered piece too. Information laundering actors also are sometimes supported by cyber capabilities, benefit from the inauthentic amplification through social media. For example, we've seen in our cases the use of self-publication softwares like IFTT or forgeries, forged letters, and so on. So, well, we got to the information laundering model that the NATO STRECOM COE proposed to investigate this sort of processes. And as a metaphor of money laundering, we see that it consists of three phases. The placement phase will be when the first actor applies the first technique to the information in the original source, and then it starts a process of layering in which this network of factors will progressively combine a set of techniques in order to further launder the piece of information and consequently obscuring the source. And finally, the integration phase will be reached when the laundered information becomes part of the public discourse. Parallelly to the process of information laundering happens a process of source magnification that will imply users sharing just like the laundered information without applying any of the techniques that we saw previously. And yeah, but this is also important because it increases the visibility, for example, in search engines, and therefore, again, the credibility of the laundered piece. And this will be an example. Information laundering processes can be very simple or very complex. It depends on how many actors participate in each process and their nature, if they are transnational or if they are essentially domestic or both. So this is an example of a simple one, but we see clearly we have the placement actor, which will be mixed news. And then it brings, it distorts the information in the original source, and it opens the layering phase where several actors will apply progressively different techniques, and the information will be further laundered. Let's just discuss briefly some of the key findings of the study. I will say that the main conclusion that we get from this study is that information laundering happens in every domestic media ecosystem. But not only that, also there are domestic outlets. Well, in every case study that we research, we found domestic outlets considered as or either proclaiming or proxy that enable the spread of foreign influence in the region. So it is actually kind of, it's very remarkable because we have countries like, for example, Iceland or Denmark that we thought that we were not going to find any domestic actors, but actually we did. And the second finding probably is that most of networks are essentially transnational. It's very difficult to identify laundering process that is purely, there are some laundering processes that are purely domestic in the domestic language, but this is like the exception and not the norm. And here in the Nordic-Baltic region, we have processes that combine also different languages. So the networks are transnational, and the laundering processes are mainly, they utilize the domestic language in combination with English language and Russian language, of course. And there was high activity found from Baltic programming media across the whole Nordic-Baltic region. So Baltic programming media are not only relevant in information laundering processes targeting the Baltics, they are also very relevant targeting other countries from the Nordic-Baltic region. There are three types of information launderings identified in this study. The first ones will be when it's actually a Kremlin official or pro-Kremlin source, the one that conducts the placement. It's generally a foreign, like a foreign or international media outlet. It can be also domestic, but yeah, so the Kremlin or pro-Kremlin source conduct the placement, and then it opens the layering phase for the laundering. The B type will be when the laundering process is willingly or unwillingly initiated by domestic actors independently to their affiliation of the Kremlin. And this, once this process is started, then Kremlin or pro-Kremlin actors intervene and opportunistically exploit this laundering process in order to, get involved and continue launder the information. So the Kremlin actors, the pro-Kremlin actors will start their activity in the layering phase. And finally, we have a C type of information laundering, where the activity of Kremlin or pro-Kremlin actors is purely accidental. This is, for example, is very common in some conspiracy theories. We saw many cases related to 5G, anti-5G groups, which used like regardless, like they were not any kind of like interested in sharing pro-Kremlin sources in order to spread pro-Kremlin influence, but they share pro-Kremlin sources in order to support the cause. Finally, we identified 3 sub-regions within the Nordic-Baltic region. First, the Baltics, and the Baltics, the key. The Baltics is sensibly concentrates the most active pro-Kremlin networks, and the key actors that participate in this region are Kremlin official and pro-Kremlin media. Then we have Sweden, Finland, and Norway, where the key actors are pro-Kremlin media and proxies. And here it's relevant to highlight the importance of domestic proxy actors translating foreign laundering processes into the domestic language, and therefore in order to influence domestic audiences. And finally, we have Iceland and Denmark, where the key actors were proxies and accidental actors, not so many pro-Kremlin or Kremlin official media participating in this process, but they do have the highest source magnification in the region via translations into other EU languages. 3 ways of conducting information laundering in the region. The less common will be the domestic one, as I've mentioned, is a purely domestic news. Laundered, the placement is conducted by domestic actors and laundered in order to, like in the domestic language, in order to influence domestic audiences. Then we will have like the transnational one, which is the most common, with the involvement of both international and domestic actors in the laundering process. And finally, the foreign information laundering, which will be a foreign actor takes domestic news in order to portray certain image about that country to certain audiences. For example, let's say Western moral decay. This is a practice very common when disseminating narratives about Western moral decay. They take a story that is a domestic story about a country, let's say Denmark, and they conduct, they apply a set of techniques and they disseminate to international audiences. For example, that Denmark is a country corrupting moral values because they allow animal prostitution. So that was one of our case studies. So there was no laundering in Danish language, but there was a lot of laundering in Russian and English language about this particular case. And finally, well, the concluding remarks, there are plenty of concluding remarks regarding to our findings in this study. So I invite you to read the publications, which are in the website of the NATO Strategic Communications Center of Excellence. Basically, information laundering occurs in every domestic media environment. We also apply the same methodology to the German media environment during the COVID-19 crisis and Alexei Navalny, and we also identify the laundering processes there and domestic actors involved in those processes, and networks are essentially transnational. The ability of a laundered piece to reach mainstream media depends on the right combination of techniques, and the most effective combination that our study saw was a misappropriation with Wuzel effect. Disinformation works, but a combination of misappropriation with Wuzel effect is a more subtle and therefore more difficult to unmask. So I will leave it there because I think that I'm running out of time, and I invite you to read the publications if you are interested in the topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Belén. Thank you for the very interesting talk.